Again, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to warmly welcome you to this discussion event of our working paper titled Immigration and Citizenship in Europe, Does Illiberalism Matter? This is the title of the presentation. The title of the actual paper is Immigration and Citizenship in Europe, Does Illiberalism Matter? Europeanness solidarity from the EU and Hungary to the UK. My name is Bálint Mikola. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow here at CEU Democracy Institute, and I'm going to be chairing this session today. I have the pleasure of having with me Dmitry Kochanov as a presenter. Dmitry is a professor at CEU and a senior research fellow at the CEU Democracy Institute. He leads the Rule of Law Working Group of CEU Democracy Institute and teaches at the Department of Legal Studies. He's the author of numerous monographs and journal articles on the rule of law and citizenship and related matters. It's a pleasure to have him here in person. We also have Elena Basheshka joining us online as a presenter. Elena is a CEU research affiliate. She holds a law degree and a PhD in law from the Faculty of Law, University of Groningen, and her research interests focus on EU enlargement, EU external relations, rule of law, citizenship matters, protection of human rights. She's recently doing research on rule of law in EU law and international relations, with a particular emphasis on the practices of rule of law. We also have Vladimir Nutt here, who is an honorary professor at the AUTHLIB Faculty of Law and also an associate professor at Central European University. He received his PhD from AUTHLIB University and pursued international studies at Johns Hopkins University and the SIAS Bologna Center. He has been involved both in academic activity and as an expert in governmental and non-governmental actions within the framework of several international institutions. He is also the editor of the international journal, the Refugee Law Reader, and he published a monograph on the development of Hungarian refugee law. Finally, we have a second discussant here, Alice Nagy, who is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Social Sciences. She has a PhD in sociology from ELTE, and she earlier also did nationalism studies MA at CEU, and her research focuses on strategies of transborder Hungarian organizations, and she teaches and researches human rights and citizenship studies at the AUTHLIB University Department of Human Rights and Politics. So it's a pleasure having you all here. In terms of format, we will start with the presentation of the paper that is being discussed. I would kindly ask Dmitry and Elena to present their findings in a maximum of 20 minutes, which will be succeeded by comments from our two esteemed discussants, and then we will proceed with Q&A with the audience. So, Dmitry, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. So it's a huge honor to be here, especially at home in CEU. And I will start. Elena will continue. And first, the background. So we have a perception of this liberalism divide that affects the majority of substantive issues affecting our lives. So liberal states will do it one way, illiberal states will do it another way. And what we try to do in the paper is to use three case studies, the European Union, the UK, and Hungary, in order to see whether the same divide also holds true in terms of affecting policy in the area of immigration and citizenship. And to our suspicion, we need more countries in order to come up with a definitive answer. But what we have discovered is that most likely these kind of issues are out with the scope of the divide. So citizenship and migration are bridging liberalism and the liberalism, and not in the interests of liberalism, I regret to say. So what I will do, I will present the first case study, then Elena will go on with Hungary and the UK, and we will offer a brief conclusion before we turn to the discussions. So why at all should we speak about the EU? Migration and citizenship are not the core areas of EU expertise and engagement, especially citizenship is outside of the scope of EU competences. Yet, and migration is more and more Europeanized, as it were. And what we see is that the EU is exhibiting very vivid interest in increasing engagement with these fields. And of course, we can speak about each of the fields more specifically. There are plenty of notable differences there, but what emerges as the general picture based on our analysis is that the EU plays a very atypical role in regulating the field, in that it tries to depoliticize, as it has done with the internal market, as it has done with plenty of other areas of engagement. It tries to depoliticize migration and to present it as a purely technocratic field, which is not actually within this liberalism spectrum. And by doing this, unfortunately, it actually helps the illiberal view on what migration is about and how migration should be managed. And first some figures. So if we look at the now official numbers, 28,000 people lost their lives in the Mediterranean over the last 8 years. Of course, you can say people were drowning all the way since we think about Mare Nostrum, the Roman Empire. But in fact, the spike of drowning starts when the EU, together with the member states, decided to withdraw the rescue missions and to outsource as much as possible the saving of a particular class of migrants, those who are the passport poor, as we call them, non-white migrants, to outsource the saving of those migrants to the Libyans and other guys on the other side of the Mediterranean who are fully equipped and who are on the payroll of the European Union. So the European Union, as a technocracy, chose a technocratic way of dealing with migration, which is what our colleague here, Omer Schatz, characterizes as deterrence through killing. And that's why we refer to the EU in the paper on a number of occasions as a killing machine. It's not killing by roaming the streets with a knife. It's killing by establishing the system of well-paid and well-organized system of the outsourcing of violence that would function in such a way that as many people trying to cross into the EU illegally, of course, we should always keep in mind that legality is not the divide that applies to those who intend to apply for asylum, because anyone who intends to apply for asylum is a legal applicant. So the law is not on the side of this kind of perspective. The dominant approach is to try to pretend that it's not us and to make sure that those guys drown by not saving them using the Maltese, using the Italian, using the Greek, the Coast Guard, but to notify the Libyans and to make sure that they're kidnapped from the sea and then brought to the Libyan prisons. And in this, the European Union adds a notable layer of strongly illiberal, let's put it that way, illegality to the whole story of migration management, because by misrepresenting this issue as a technocratic issue and by not being fully within the scope of the ECHR, no matter what the European Court of Justice benevolently says, the European Union actually is helping the member states, both liberal and illiberal, who seem to be in consensus about this policy, to escape their own legal guarantees in terms of making sure that people are not deprived of their right to apply for asylum, and that they're not deprived of their right to life. So the most basic rights are at stake here. And there is a notable jurisprudence at the supranational level about joining the European Convention on Human Rights. If the EU was a full member, this kind of policy would not have been possible. But since now the Court of Justice has twice decided that the European Union should not, or the European Union is special enough in order not to fully not to expect full alignment with the CHR, we have a situation when on the European continent today there are only a handful of jurisdictions which think of themselves as special. By special meaning not to be threatened by the protection of human rights coming from Strasbourg. Those jurisdictions are Belarus, Russia, and the European Union. And the European Union is used by its member states in order to create a complex shield of semi-legality, separating their own ECHR obligations from what is expected of the European Union and collective actions, which finds itself under the umbrella of the European Union. So unexpectedly and probably shockingly, would be shockingly to the founders of the Union, which was created in order to promote the common values of the member states from the very beginning, is now used as a tool in order to solidify and strongly implement this deeply questionable policy, which we characterize as lawlessness law, together with Sarganti of Ghent and Yale. And in general, if we speak about the liberalism divide, probably it's difficult to apply to the supranational level, because there's no classical democracy there, there's no classical liberalism, illiberalism there, and the literature on the new democratic deficit is growing from Dribine to Wilkinson to Davis, when we fully realize that even by giving more powers to the European Parliament, we do not necessarily democratize the Union. And we don't necessarily create a situation where the current policy in migration management would be reversed as a result of this kind of anti-democratic technocratization. So this kind of technocratization helps the member states, liberal and illiberal, to bridge the divide about migration, which is why we have exactly the same death tolls and exactly the same human rights violations coming from all around the border of the European Union. So Poland under peace was not behaving in any way differently compared with the Republic of Latvia or compared with Lithuania. Greece was not behaving in any way differently compared with Italy, etc., and all of that is a result, I suggest, of coming together in the European Union, which is not subjected to the same democracy and human rights guarantees, and using the European Union as a shield in order to put up this system. And of course, Frontex stands out as an EU agency, which saw its budget skyrocket over the last years, and which is not under anyone's supervision at all, because the Court of Justice is the only court where you can go against Frontex, and the Court of Justice says that the threshold of administrative proof that you need to show that Frontex is actually potentially to blame is so high that even if you have been already pushed back by Frontex several times, there is no guarantee that you will be pushed back again, as the Court of Justice clarified in the last case about it. So you don't have standing against Frontex, which means that violence at the supranational level is not accountable at all. And this lavishly funded non-accountable violence produces a situation when the statements by Frontex that Frontex will leave the Hungarian border because of the illiberal nature of the Hungarian regime sound overwhelmingly cynical, if not absurd, if we know the death toll that Frontex generates all over the world, through affecting the families of all the migrants coming from different continents, and also knowing the genuinely benevolent character of the Hungarian border next to the death toll in the Mediterranean and the overwhelming torture in the Belarusian forests. So the main message of our fundings is not an easy one, and of course the situation is different at the national level. And here I turn to Elena for Hungary and the UK.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, for this great introduction. I would like to also thank you all for being here. I do apologize, I'm not there with you today in person. However, I hope that we'll have a great discussion even this way. I'll build up to Dimitri's interview, and we'll say just a few words of the main reason, main inspiration behind this article, this paper. Well, first of all, we start with inserting that this is a very sensitive topic. It is sensitive for more than one reason, definitely. And first of all, it is sensitive not only because elections these days are won by political parties building on the topic of migration, but also we found that it is sensitive also for many scholars, because not many would write on the deaths in the Mediterranean, which are not happening just from yesterday, which are happening more than 10 years ago now with a huge intensity, I would say. We wrote an article with Dimitri 10 years ago about this, and nothing has changed since then for the better. It has the situation only worsened. So this is the second thing, and also, as we have seen, it is probably sensitive for the European Union as well, because we do see basically double standards applied in this field. Why? Well, on one hand, we have seen a very positive approach with the Ukrainians fleeing the war, and the first time actually activation of the temporary protection directive. We haven't seen such approach with all these people actually fleeing also wars and other crises, but coming from different non-European places. So these are the points that were very important actually, and that this is why we looked beyond what usually many other scholars are looking at. Talking about Ukraine only and Ukrainian refugees, and not actually opening our eyes in front of all these deaths, and as mentioned by Dimitri, it's 38,000 people missing, or well, missing is basically being dead, drowning, and even more before these 10 years. It's 43,000 since 1993. So closing our eyes to that and talking about only about positive stuff would be rather cynical, I would say. This is why also we are not only looking at Hungary as an example, but we are looking also at other countries, because we do actually believe that this is happening on a rather European level, I would say. There is a consensus almost among most of the states in the approach towards migrants, especially towards migrants outside Europe, coming from outside Europe. So we looked at Hungary and we looked at the UK as well. Both very different examples. Hungary has been qualified as a illiberal state, while the UK has been qualified as a liberal state. Our conclusion, however, is that both countries when it comes to migration and approach to migrants and deterrence, if you want, of migrants do not differ very much. It's just probably the measures taken might be different, but in the end, the result and the desired result is not very much different. So when we looked at Hungary, we looked at the laws, which has been changed in order to deter migrants from arriving in the country. It has been also, all these laws actually have been amended in as a response to the greater influx of migrants. We didn't go very much into detail because the paper is that was not, it goes beyond very much the scope of the paper. It's rather the product picture we wanted to paint, what has been done by the state to deter these migrants. So Hungary did amend its laws, doing very well in terms of the deterring asylum seekers. And as you know, it is the embassy law, the Soros law, that the building of defense that we had. So all these measures taken by Hungary were in direction of deterring migrants and even making impossible to claim, in a way impossible to claim, especially with the embassy law, is almost impossible to claim asylum in the country because the asylum seekers had to seek asylum and have intention, declare their intention in another country, which had to be approved then by Hungary. So it made it also, it made it all the almost impossible for the asylum seekers to claim, to arrive in the country. So that's why we had just a few actually asylum seekers lately in the country. It has been initially introduced in response of COVID, but then it lasted until it was extended until the end of last year. So that is for the laws of Hungary, and we are very much aware of that. And European Commission is very much aware, it seems, of that, because there were many actually infringement procedures initiated and judgments also. However, we don't see many such procedures against other EU member states. And this is what we do like to emphasize, and this is the main point of the article, basically. We are, of course, aware of the practices of Hungary and of the infringement of law and of the amendments introduced to deter migrants. But we are also aware of other similar practices which have not been addressed by the European Union sufficiently, if at all. So that's one aspect. Then we turn also to the United Kingdom, where we see, well, United Kingdom is well known for its compliance with the law and with the court judgments. This has been questioned recently with the attempt of the United Kingdom government to basically overturn the judgment of the Supreme Court, which has declared the Rwanda asylum plan illegal. I'll come to that, but I just wanted to update you because I think the paper you have doesn't have this information because it has been submitted before this happened. So what we're seeing in United Kingdom as well as in other EU countries, and probably even more, immigration is a very, very sensitive issue, as we know, also as we have seen with Brexit first. And it has been a dominant question and probably the main cause for what happened, main cause for Brexit. So that's one thing. Another thing is the response to asylum seekers. What we had in the United Kingdom is actually introduction of two laws or plans. One is the illegal Immigration Act, which has been brought last year, which was adopted last year, and it has been very heavily criticized. What it basically says is that if you do arrive in the kingdom illegally, then you can't stay, you can't claim asylum. Your claim is baseless, so you'll be just deported, sent somewhere else. So most of the asylum seekers, as you know, do arrive in the country illegally, and this is basically because there are no other ways of arriving in the country. No sufficient other ways to be correct to arrive in the country. So 90% of the asylum seekers actually do come illegally in the country. So this is the main problem now created with the Illegal Immigration Act, because if most of these people cannot stay because they arrived illegally, and there is no other way for most of them to arrive in the country. And we do have a huge problem. Just yesterday there was some, because this is a field where every day you see new data and making probably your previous argument somewhat obsolete, because it is a very dynamic field, and politicians are obsessed, of course, with immigration. So yesterday I've read actually that there are 33,000 in the country staying now, which in accordance with this act cannot even claim asylum. So they should be sent somewhere. Something should be done with these people, and that's why we do have the Rwanda plan. Actually, what is the Rwanda plan? It is a plan basically to offshore asylum seekers in Rwanda, especially those who are not eligible in the country, in the UK, to stay here and claim asylum here, where they're going to be processed. Of course, it has been very much criticized by everyone, and especially by both the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom. Both courts decided that this plan is illegal. And long story short, because Rwanda is not a safe country. As such, however, the UK government is very persistent on making this happen, making the Rwanda plan work. So that's why we actually had the United Kingdom actually has a plan now, in a way, overturning the judgment of the Supreme Court, and forbidding the decision makers, including the courts, to basically treat Rwanda as a non-safe place. So they should, all decision makers, including the Secretary of State and the courts and those making this deciding on the applications, should treat basically Rwanda as a safe place rather than a non-safe place, as the court established by evidence-based data, of course. So this is a very dangerous precedent, and many have warned actually. So it is an aspect that we haven't mentioned in the previous version, of course, because it was submitted slightly earlier, but I think it's very important, because what we see now in the United Kingdom is very much overturning of and probably even shifting a little bit to illiberalism, something that I would have argued previously that it may not happen, because it is very much a country that complies with the law. So this is one aspect that we discussed. Another aspect that we discussed is citizenship. And we do see differences between Hungary and between the United Kingdom. Unlike Hungary, which is very much keen on actually not naturalizing, but giving citizenship to its kin minorities. That's Hungarians living in other, usually neighboring countries. We don't, so increasing that way, of course, the citizenry, we do see somewhat opposite practice in the United Kingdom. What we see in the United Kingdom is very restrictive, probably, rules in that respect. So it cannot be easily passed after the first generation living abroad. So it might be connected, this practice actually might be connected to the fact that it is very much a country with, it's the fifth, I think, immigration country in the world. So UK does have many immigrants. On one hand, it is one of the top countries accepting immigrants. On the other hand, it is one of these countries which fights against immigrants. So it is a little bit, we do see contradiction in this. Also, if you want to take Brexit, we do see on one hand cutting immigration from Europe, but now we do see very much increased immigration from other countries. For instance, Brexit didn't solve the problem, because what we had back then is around 2 net migrants, I say. So that's a difference between immigration and immigration. So we had 200,000 net migration, and now we do have 745,000. So it's more than triple. Okay, it does include also Ukrainians and both arrivals and other forms, but it still tripled. So we can't say that Brexit has solved the problem, and neither we can say that these new plans with Rwanda will save the problem. It may even increase the problem, because there will be many human rights issues, as many organizations have warned actually so far. And what we essentially also see in the United Kingdom when it comes to citizenship is the return of banishment, deprivation of citizens. Oh, I have 2 minutes left, I'm seeing, so I'll be done in like 2 minutes, no problem at all. Just to mention that we do have a huge problem also with the deprivation of citizens, because it has largely increased. We didn't until 2006, I think it was, from 1973 to 2006, we had no deprivations, a deprivation of citizenship, and now there are over 1,500 so far. So it's only in less than 18 years, basically. It is, well, yeah, it might be 2006, I think it was. The numbers, the figures, I think it's from 2006 until now we do have more than 1,500. There were no deprivations before. It is very much a response to the security concerns, of course, terrorism as well, but also it creates very much a difference between British citizens, because not everyone can be deprived of citizenship. It creates different tiers, because British citizens with no foreign heritage, who are ethnically British, cannot be deprived, because that would make them stateless. But not all people who are stateless without this citizenship would have this privilege, because if the government thinks, if the state secretary actually thinks that you do have the basis to get, even if you are in the end stateless, if you do have the basis to get another citizenship, they'll still do that. So even if you are in the end stateless, so this creates different tiers of Britishness, if you want, something that, of course, in reality is not the case. I'll finish here, because I'm aware that you may do have also questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
And just one minute to connect this all together. So what we ultimately come up with is the ethnic vision of all this. So both the UK and Hungary are equally ethnicized in their approach to citizenship, and race obviously plays a significant role, because in the UK, if you are not white, you can always lose it. And here, if you are not white, most likely you will not get it. At least looking at the numbers. And this is exactly the same what we see in the policies adopted by the EU. If you are not white, you will not be saved. If you are white, there will be no problem. The Maltese will come, and the Italians will come, and they will fish you out of the sea. So this all comes in tune very nicely with a recent book which deeply impressed us, and that's Euro Whiteness by Hans Kundnani, who suggests that Europe and he doesn't place the UK within the same paradigm, but I would open that question, that Europe in fact is not a cosmopolitan political creation at all. That in fact it's an emerging ethnicized supranational project which actually puts race at the forefront when it manages migration and citizenship. And this is something that we unquestionably see at the EU, Hungary, and the UK examples, as well as plenty of other countries can be added based on broader overviews. So the EU then is an ethno-policy which favors a particular race, and Europeanness and our way of life, etc., is just a different way of putting of making a problem. And I would like to distance from Elena's framing of migration as a problem. It's not a problem at all. There is no problem with more people coming. The problem appears when you think that if someone's skin pigmentation is different from yours, then you have to fight that person, strip him of his citizenship, throw him out to Rwanda, etc. But ultimately, there is absolutely no difference between Hungary, the UK, and what is the worst, probably the EU level, and the EU plays a huge role here. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much for both of the presenters, and now I would like to give the floor to the discussants. Since we've run a little bit over time, I would like to ask you to keep your comments concise. So if possible, 5 minutes each, then that would be excellent. But if it's not possible, then still try to be concise. And first, I would like to ask Boadijer.
Thank you so much. I mean, it is always thrilling to speak about a killing machine and its aids and assistance. And here we are doing that. And that I do sympathize with the paper is reflected by the fact that at the time when you came to the CU, or even before, I published an article about nationality, calling it together with Tamás Kende, where the title said, is it an umbilical cord or a lariat? And then later on, I published another one calling nationality a stigma. So we are on the same wavelengths. Nevertheless, I do have some differences with what you said and what you wrote. I will concentrate on a few main points. Occasionally, I will appear as if I was doctrinaire. I am not, but I think that the analysis can advance more if you are more disciplined in the use of language. So let's get to that. What's the problem, in fact? Here in your presentation, you were very clear that you see the EU as a tool of the member states. But if we come to this lawlessness law problem, then there are three options. The EU breaches its own laws. That's the problem, that the EU is not faithful to its own normative regime. Or is it the member states like Hungary or Greece, which breaches the laws which are valid within the EU? And the third one, which you did not address in the paper, but which is happening in front of us, are the EU member states changing the rules of the EU? I mean, the new pact is being adopted, and we see the changes. So, but these are three different problems. And so when you write, for example, page 6, that the EU is far removed not only from the ethical and moral, but also from the minimal legal ideals of the rule of law and human rights protection, emerging as a killing machine, denying the racialized others any humanity by default, then the question is, do we want to criticize the EU's practice based on a moral or natural law basis? Or do we want to show that it contradicts to its principles? So the actual practice contradicts to its principles or not? Now, then moving to the dominant interpretative frame, which you designate as the Euro whiteness thing. Now, first of all, I mean, Punani recognizes that he takes it from Joseph Burrets, of course. And Joseph Burrets uses Euro whiteness in a different way, because he addresses our problems, Central and Eastern Europeans who want to be like Western Europeans. So we are the dirty white. and the Western Europeans were the Euro-white, and we wanted to move from the dirty whiteness to the Euro-whiteness. And then at page 40, you approvingly quote Amanda Garrett saying, there has always been an intersection between populist politics and media discourse, and there is strong evidence that fear-based messages appear during important political and electoral markers, like elections and in liberal nations. So the question here is, whereas Euro-whiteness didn't have much in advancing, I believe, the idea, you totally ignore the secularization paradigm as a possible paradigm, whereas what I see in most of the cases is that the secularization paradigm explains much of what is happening, whether in the UK or in Hungary. Now, as to Hungary, I have written extensively on that. My view on that is that probably Hungary is an idiosyncratic case because of Orban. Orban is running a plebiscitary leadership-based authoritarian regime. So all the talk about migration that comes from Orban and his spin doctors is unrelated to the facts, unlike in the UK or in Greece, where you actually have the people. And the responses may or may not be adequate. Certainly, they are inhuman, but they are responses to actual facts. In Orban, there's nothing like that. Even in 2015, where you have in the statistics 175,000 people crossing Hungary, there were 5,000 cases starting, refugee status determination. So I have an extensive argument on that, but bowing to Balin's wish, I will not go into that, except for the questions and answers. There is one topic which came up shortly and which would relate to the Euro-whiteness, and that's the Ukrainian case. You sort of touch upon that and then you move away from it. So do you think that, if you want preferential treatment, which I wouldn't say, of the Ukrainians, but certainly the different treatment to the Syrians, do you want to interpret that as racist or not? Because you don't go along the road till the end on that point. And there, I mean, let me be somewhat conservative at the last moment of my short contribution. I seriously believe that keeping regular migration, irregular migration, and asylum seeking possibly apart from analytical point of view. Of course, in the boat, they are sitting together in the boat. But from an analytical point of view, I would definitely keep them apart, because if you look at Hungary, for example, as you mentioned in a context, Hungary is an immigration country, but not just because it naturalized 1 million people, but because, for example, in the last year, it has invited workers from the Philippines and elsewhere. So it's the deeds of the state in terms of regular migration is totally different from what it does in the context of stopping irregular migrants from entering, and thereby stopping also asylum seekers. So I would keep that apart, and therefore sentences like the one from page 40, indeed why both liberal democracies and illiberal regimes may prefer restrictive measures to reduce immigration. The enactment of immigration policies in liberal democracies is much more scrutinized than in illiberal regimes. Now, regular immigration, to my mind, is a totally different topic. I mean, you look at the German debates about regular immigration, you look at the Hungarian practice. I would not push it into the Euro-whiteness frame, not even into the secularization frame. Thank you so much. I hope I was more or less reasonable.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask the presenters if it's okay with them if we move on to the second discussion, and then you can answer questions raised. So, audience, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I feel like that with Bodija we had read the same paper. So we are coming from the very same perspective, I feel. And that differs to me from what I've just heard from Dimitri, because how you started, and that's maybe or most probably my wishful reading of the paper, because I will have two main concerns regarding this entire idea of Euro-whiteness and how you play with the case studies. And the one of which is the focus on the mechanism which is being put into progress, right? And the other one is an analytical that I think might be advanced or might be advanced, you know, the paper itself. So first of all, I very much agree with Elena in addressing that this is a very sensitive topic. It is sensitive because it is politics, right? So this is going to be always sensitive, but it is about lives as well. So, and that always needs to be addressed. So it is interesting to talk about the killing machine, but if you have sentences like the EU as a death machine and the EU as a killing machine, you really have to be, I don't want to use the word careful, but you know, not only to seek for the attention of your readership, but to build up a very analytical, as at least this is how I feel about it, to build up a very analytical approach so that you could show how this killing, why do you think that it is a killing machine, how this works, and since it is political, then the political implications of what you are saying is of crucial importance. And that's what your readership will take with them home. And I think that this might be a bit better addressed, or might, you know, just to use a bit different emphasis in the paper, let's say. First of all, I have the EU or the EU member states dilemma with your first case study, which, by the way, I was not reading as a case study. I was reading this paper that this is about the European project. You also talk about that this is a European project, which deals with Euro-whiteness, or where your key concept is Euro-whiteness solidarity, and it is about the European Union, which has the member states. And there comes Boldizsár's point that the member states transform the EU rules. And this is what's the takeaway of this paper, I feel. And this is the mechanism I want to read a bit more, or discuss here a bit more, how this mechanism takes place, this transformation. And that I feel like could be, and that's the wishful reading that I did with the paper, better addressed if you have the EU and you have the different case studies, not only Hungary and the UK, but as many as you could. Honestly, I was not sure if you are doing Hungary, why you are doing Hungary and the UK. I have some ideas that I would be happy to discuss, maybe in the question and answers. But first of all, I think that this would make sense to put a bit more emphasis on how this transformation takes place within the European Union, and to make it clear at the beginning of the paper a bit. I feel like it's a bit imbalanced, because you are just referring to the political relevance of it being a killing machine, and so on and so forth, and it is followed by a very strict legal analysis. Where is the political analysis there? And I would feel so much confident with referring to Euro-whiteness solidarity as a core concept if that political analysis would take place. And I see it doable if the EU is not treated as a case study, but as the main actor who suffers from this transformation by your case studies. And maybe now I will move on to the case studies and talk a bit later about this if you feel like. So you again mentioned that you have Hungary and the UK because they both use ethnicized citizenship policies. And here my weak points come in with citizenship, because that's what I read. So I feel that it could be your crucial concept. I'm not saying instead of Euro-whiteness solidarity, but along that citizenship. And you know, Dimitri, so you have, I've noted it myself that the paper sometimes lives in the footnotes, because you have the concept of citizenship, you can play with it very nicely. And it would suit the case studies on Hungary and the UK, because indeed they do have these ethnicized citizenship policies. And this is why I was surprised that with Hungary you start with the status law. Why status law? If my wishful reading is true, that the EU is the key actor here and not one of the case studies, because status law is something that's been amended, as mentioned also by Elena, so that it would comply to EU norms, right? Then why talk about that and not about the constitutional changes? Once you have that very neat legal right analysis, why not talk about what happened after 2010. You only mentioned the amendment on the Hungarian Citizenship Act, which I think that would definitely support your argumentation better if you show how the amendment was changed, how that more than 1 million people was created, how it is in relation to the national minorities and their exclusion, how it relates to how citizenship policies looked like before, right? And here again, the numbers could come in very interestingly, that before 2010, we had only a handful of people applying for the Hungarian, or earning, or the Hungarian citizenship, and there are so many research which shows how difficult it was to earn the Hungarian citizenship, and after that you can see that it is given, right, to more than 1 million people, and how it is a simplified preferential, so many words that you otherwise play with in the paper. And also in reflecting to the Hungarian case study, you have in the UK case study a discussion on the many layers and statuses that you have within that citizenship regime, and that could also be played within the Hungarian one, so it would create a nice balance. But at the same time, within the UK case study, you discuss many other political aspects, and here is another analytical point that I am happy to make, that you touch upon media, which was of crucial importance before Brexit, right? And it is political, so it could add again, along with that very neat and nice legal discussion or scrutiny that you are doing, to emphasis on the political nature of immigration and citizenship, right? So I think that this could also be done within the Hungarian case study, with the billboards. You have so many researches, analyses that you could put a bit more life into the footnotes in the Hungarian case study. This is what I have in my mind, that you could touch upon that as well. And by doing so, you could create so many more interrelated elements of these two case studies, which at the end could inform much more about this, with Bodhisattva's words, the transformation that the member states or ex-member states, or you will decide on your future case studies, would do to the European Union. And yeah, I have for the Q&A some other thoughts if you. So I'm stopping here.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I would ask the presenters to offer your brief reflections on the comments from the discussants.
Should we start with Elena for a change?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you very much for the comments. I would like actually to give you my view and approach on some of these. I'll leave for Dimitri, and I do agree. I'll start actually with the comment about the Hungarian law, because why not? Why starting with the status law? I do actually agree that probably I should have pay more attention to the changes of the nationality law, going in further detail. I do agree on that. I'll just explain why the status law is mentioned. It is more mentioned in the context of the interpretation by the Venice Commission, and what their approach is to treating actually minority rights in neighboring countries, in other countries, and also to see the approach of Slovakia as well, and Romania as well. So probably more about, because Slovakia took some very, very difficult steps in the stripping actually all nationals who would naturalize afterwards. And we did have a very actually rigid approach by Romania, and comments by the Venice Commission. So I do agree that probably the status law might not be the most important, and we should have go in more details with the changes of the nationality law. As for the I do also agree about the approach, actually the interrelated elements between the citizenships compared in the two countries. It's not entirely, I would say, politicized in my view, what is happening with the different tiers of citizenship in the UK. It is more a response to the security considerations. However, in the end, the practical approach they took is very difficult, because as a consequence, it creates different levels, different layers, if you want, of citizens. I don't think that it necessarily had to do with the politics. But in the end, yes, it does create very different rights, if you want, of same citizens. With regard to the first comments about whether it can be seen as a racist approach, how the Ukrainians were treated as compared to how other migrants are treated. Well, although it is a sensitive topic, and I would put it in nice words and polite terms, yes, it is. I would say, I would rather argue that it is in a way racist. Why? Because this temporary protection directive could have been actually before activated before the Ukrainians came. There was certainly enough reason, and many deaths and many sufferings of other migrants who probably could have been protected in a similar way, or the same way as Ukrainians are actually protected now with this directive. So this differentiation between the migrants coming from Ukraine and those coming from mainly Africa, it is, well, very much racist, I would argue. And we do have in so many states now, not only in Hungary, comments by not only politicians but also surveys done among citizens and residents, people that they do not actually fit into the culture. They do not, I'm talking about the migrants from Africa, they are not fitting into the culture, into the way of living, into the, if you want, religion as well. They're not only used and misused, this issue is not only misused during elections, but on a everyday basis, basically. So examples are used every day on some attacks or incidents to emphasize how these people are simply different and other, rather than people coming from Europe, or in this case it's Ukraine. Many years ago it was people coming from Yugoslavia. Even back then the temporary directive was not activated. So it is, I would say, very much a racist approach, I'm afraid. Yeah, I'll leave the floor to Dimitri now, if he wants to continue.
Amazing. So, thank you so much, Ellen. I fully agree with pretty much all what you said, and the comments were spectacular. Your reading is the right reading, just like Boldishar's reading is the right reading. The paper is offered to the readers, and my reading would be the paper leads to the footnotes. So the footnotes is the most important part of the paper. At least, when I get a new text from fellow lawyers, I read the footnotes first, and then I decide whether it's worth it. Yeah. And based on the footnotes, I can cite it. I see where the argument is going, and the footnotes probably fill in some of the lacuna that you have both identified, because the footnotes lead to other studies, both in relation to the racism at the border, the harsh nature of the border regime that the EU has built, and the mechanics of that, plus the depoliticization of all that. So the footnotes are important. And since they're all in the same boat, I think making analytical distinction between different people in the boat would be dishonest in analyzing the policy. And I thought a lot about this, and we discussed this with Elena. And what really ticked my approach was the case of a French lady who was in that boat together with together with the migrants from Afghanistan and Syria, who herself also has a Turkish passport and who was pushed back by the Greek border guard, coast guard, exactly the same way as everybody else, although she was showing her French passport. They laughed into her face and they pushed her, and now she's serving many years in a Turkish prison. For her, it was the only way to escape Turkey, to take a place in that boat and to get back home to France, because otherwise she was suspected by the regime in power in Turkey in participation in the coup against Erdogan. So she would be the ideal case. She's a citizen. She has an absolute right to enter the European Union. But the fact that she's in that boat and the fact that she's racialized deprives her of any rights whatsoever. So when we speak about migration, we shouldn't follow the legalistic approach. These are asylum seekers, these are citizens, these are whoever. We should follow the boats. And when we follow the boats, we discover that a private jet is regulated very differently from a Ryanair flight, and the Ryanair flight is regulated very differently from a line boat, and the line boat is very different from a yacht and from a rubber boat. And in fact, we see it in practice, and we discuss it with Sarah Ganti in Lawlessness Law, which is forthcoming in the Climate Journal of European Law. We discuss how the mechanics of this works in EU law, not in EU law and policy, but in EU practice. When the Frontex drone sees an Israeli yacht, then it will notify the Italians, and the Italians will help. When a Frontex drone sees a rubber boat with totally different contingent of people on board, then the Italians will not be notified. Only the Libyan pirates who are on the EU's bankroll will be notified, and then they will come and kidnap those people. And there are amazing accounts, including in the New Yorker, about what happens in the prisons that the EU helps build, which have already housed more than 100,000 people who are kidnapped under the pretext of being saved from the sea, although they are not actually in trouble in the majority of cases. So the mechanics of dealing with different types of border crossing and different types of vehicles is a more honest approach, to my mind, compared with the legalistic view of pretending that we treat people differently. We know that we treat people differently based on one criterion, and that criterion is race. That's why if a Ukrainian person shows up in front of the fence at the Latvian border, they will open the fence. If a Syrian person shows up in front of that fence, that person will die in front of the fence, and nobody will move a finger. And one of the cases in which our clinic is trying to get involved is an NGO worker calling an ambulance to the fence, seeing that someone is unconscious on the other side of the fence, and that NGO worker is now prosecuted by the Latvian authorities for people smuggling, because calling an ambulance is a crime if the person who is experiencing health problems is on the side of the fence, and if that person is not white, because if that person was a Ukrainian, the fence would have been opened. So, and here we come to the political. To me, the main function of the EU, and then we didn't emphasize it enough in the paper, but what is on a Saren now is already a slightly different paper with a different introduction. It has been reshuffled a little bit, also incorporating the recent examples from the UK, the attempts to sideline the courts and to hijack the legal system by those in government. So what is absolutely clear is that the EU is a very effective managerial system. It's an apolitical machine, and it's abused by the governments of the member states precisely to this end. And there is a literature calling for the stop of it. And Mike Wilkinson is one of the leaders, but also Jiří Příbram in Prague and Cardiff, and also Gareth Davis, many of others. Unless we politicize the EU, we will hear the same response from all those who want the crimes to stop. And that response is, in fact, nothing is going on, because the EU law is based on values, because the EU budget is fully transparent, etc. And then once we go into point by point into the techniques of killing dozens of thousands of people, we see that in fact one of the main functions of EU law in this particular field is precisely to kill any kind of accountability and to make sure that there is no transparency and there is no politicization of this issue. So the EU is playing a role which is absolutely antithetical to what Article 2 of the treaties, with all the values, actually tries to sell us. So it's not about EU rules. It's about the use of EU rules in order to breach national law and to breach EU law. And that's why if we count the dead, the EU has allowed, let's not put killing, although it is killing. It's killing by omission. The EU has killed by omission many times more people than Putin has killed Ukrainians during the ongoing war. And that's why freezing, well, civilians. We don't count the Wagner group guys who could have suffered damages as a result of clashes with the migrants they fish out in order to then torture and sell them as slaves. I think there could be some kind of health damage on that side as well. But we need to be absolutely open about what's going on, because once the count of the dead is into dozens of thousands, and once we know that it will never be politicized, precisely because of the racial undertone that tints everything in the story, we have to use strong language. So this is just in defense of the strong language. And I stop here to open the floor to questions.
So thank you very much. I expect that there will be probably lots of comments in the room as well as online. So now I would like to open the floor for Q&A. On a technical note, I would slightly move the camera to show people who are here in the room, and we should put it here. Okay, perfect. I think it's already good.
Is it fine? Do we signal?
Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm wondering who would like to go first. Okay, I see Joad's hand raised.
So thanks a lot for both the discussant comment and especially for the presentation and for the paper. What is new in this paper for me is that indeed this sui generis character of the European Union can be used to make it, to exempt it from some legal accountability procedure, and this can be used by national governments and by other actors, and this is something that I haven't thought of before. Now, the number one issue that kind of is an issue for me in this paper is this moralizing language. And a point that you made, Dmitry, at the very end enlightened me about where our difference comes from, I think. You said that migration is not a problem. Now, I think that in a democracy, citizens, citizens, I know that this could be a further issue, have the right to determine what is a problem. And clearly, these societies, in quite a large margin, think that migration is a problem. And actually, this is something that...
Non-white migration. We should be clear about which kind of migration is a problem. Non-white migration is a problem, and that's why we're speaking about racism here, not about migration.
Yeah, I mean that opens a further door, because these people who constitute a problem for the citizens I'm talking about have many distinguishing characteristics. One is the color of their skin, but another thing is religion. And there are many other features that could be listed, and I think for different people, different characteristics constitute an issue. So I would not narrow it down to race, but obviously that is a part of the problem. But what I'm talking about is a population, native population, that feels that there are huge costs attached to migration, that there is a competition for resources, that there are changes in their environment that makes them feel unhappy. Therefore, they demand lower amount of immigration, which is, I think, in my view, a democratic demand that politicians are supposed to respect. Of course, it doesn't give any sort of license for human rights violations, but it frames the issue as a problem and opens the door in front of the question how to deal with it. And when you look at that, then on the one hand, you have to list everything that is happening on Mediterranean, but you also need to account for the fact that the amount of immigration, illegal, legal, whatever, has increased recently, that this increase has had huge costs for particular groups in our societies, and these are not the left-wing human rights lawyers, but people who live in those environments that have the burden of facing this huge increase in immigration, and that many of these immigrants are able to stay in this country in spite of the fact that they broke the law, that they don't have the right to stay in these countries, but because of various reasons, they practically stay in these countries. So there are major violations of written and unwritten law on both sides, and there are costs attached to both. So in order to have a kind of moral judgment about the actors, including the European Union, we need to take both sides of the coin into account, and then attribute responsibility. What I definitely agree with, that this current situation is not good for transparency and attribution responsibility. I don't think there will be fewer people dying on the sea if EU did not exist. I think as many or even more would die, but at least, and this is where I agree, we would more easily allocate responsibility.
So would you like to offer an immediate response, or should we collect more questions?
I thought you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, of course, I always want to say something. I mean, George, but that's also addressed to you about this differentiation. When you say migration costs a lot, then you are talking about irregular migrants who have no right to stay. Migration, and for that we have ample data, on average contributes to the budget, contributes to national wealth. So I would warn ourselves to talk about migration and immigrants. I mean, the people who, and you call them immigrants, and they are not immigrants who are sitting in the boat. So that's where you see, and responding to you, I mean, I still would say that what you talk about is border policy or border management, and not immigration policy, because immigration policy exactly makes this difference. You are the good, I don't know, American banker who works in Budapest, and you are an immigrant, and you are the good students at the Democracy Institute, and you are immigrants, but you don't pose problems. Problems, to some extent, are posed by regular migrants, but that's rare. It does happen, but it's really rare. What the problems are posed by those who don't have the right to stay, whom you might call irregular migrants, and in old language it was called the illegal migrants. But that's totally different. Legally, they are in a different category. Sociologically, they are in a different category. Culturally, anthropologically, they are in a different category. And there, of course, you have this, and I stop. You have this problem that they are marginalized by the majority society. So they end up behaving as they do, not of their own volition. It is because the majority society does not open them a road. When it does, as it did with the Romanians who became EU citizens, as the repeated legalizations in Spain and Italy and elsewhere happened, then all those problems largely disappear, or they are not larger and different than the deviant members of their own society.
Exactly. If I can piggyback on that, we shouldn't forget about who is creating the unlawfulness of the illegal migrants. This is us. So if we speak about allocation of responsibility, I'm not certain whether I can agree with you that the 27,000 people whom we killed with the help of the EU are somehow responsible for something, rather than simply provide an example of how not to build a border force and how not to manage our affairs. Even if it was 2 people, even if it was 1,000 people, but now the orgy of violence is at such a level that that we simply cannot pretend as if any kind of balancing, even if only rhetorical, in this kind of setting is possible. That's why it's not actually moralizing language. It's a language that calls us to remind ourselves of the basic importance of the right to life, which is also in all our constitutions, all our charters of fundamental rights, and the European Convention on Human Rights. And the only institution in Europe outside of Belarus, etc., and Russia waging the war, that is not directly subscribed to that is the European Union. That's why I strongly disagree with your suspicion that without the EU the death toll would be the same. Absolutely not. And we have clear data on this, because nobody was dying when Malta and Italy were fully responsible for their segments of the sea before the intervention of the EU and Frontex. So the EU has played a fundamental, essential role in making sure that the deaths spike. And then ultimately what we agree upon, and what I think is unquestionable based on the numbers, no matter how many people you kill, migration numbers will rise. So deterrence through death doesn't work. And this is something that all the NGOs and all the government leaders also agree upon. You can leave the European Union. You can sign whatever agreements with Rwanda, what Ellen was describing, and still you will have more migrants willing to come. And the question is why. Branko Milanovic offers us a wonderful answer. The world is getting richer, and rich people want to fight for their rights. The way how the borders are now placed and how rights are allocated, namely the new feudal principle, your blood is crap, that's why you're not entitled to be in wealthy spaces. It doesn't work. In fact, this is something that we ourselves have reversed in our constitutions once we switched to liberal democracies from the feudal order. So once we made this transition, let's look at the world and allow the world not to be neo-feudal and not to look at blood as the main determinant of who should have a right and who should have no right. But I think Helena probably should have a question or a chance to.
Just a comment. I see other questions. So just a comment. It is a little bit difficult this time to even detach for me the EU from states, so because they function in tacit or even now very vocal agreement together as we speak. Actually, I think Ursula went yesterday, but she might be still there, is in Mauritania concluding another of these brilliant agreements for border management, they say. It is actually agreement for deterring all these migrants, even if cooperating with the corrupt governments, and even if we question protection of human rights. It happened before with Tunisia, and we do have many examples. We do have now Italy with Albania, so plenty of examples as we speak. As I say, we do have this is happening, and no matter how much we talk, no matter how much we try to prevent these bad practices, because not us but human rights associations and organizations have been warning about this. There's so many reports on this, and even by EU itself actually on the crimes conducted by Frontex, but nothing seems to happen. Even the court, as Dimitri would say, ducked and has not done anything about this. So it is very much difficult not to blame the European Union for what it's doing. It is doing now with the new migration framework, which has been also very much actually criticized, especially the instrumentalization of the migration using the momentum from Belarus. And it is very difficult for me to not to blame basically the European Union for what is happening, because it is the member states through the EU actually implementing their very questionable policies on migration, and the other way around, EU is helping them very much to do actually do this. So yeah, that's my comment. I would take some.
And for me, in immediate, Professor Weiler teaches us why. Actually, I think when he says we cannot vote the scoundrels out, we cannot vote out Ms. von der Leyen for all the crimes and for mass death. We could vote if before the next election, Orban would have killed 35,000 black people. It might have harmed his re-election because nobody likes this kind of crude violence and mass death. You need to be Putin and the Russian society today in order to cheer the amount of people killed. In the majority of societies, this is not politics as normal, which means that you absolutely need the European Union in order to dissociate this mass violence from the political.
So yes, of course.
So I totally understand both of the points being mentioned on both sides of the table. And my issue is not because I have the issue also with the language usage, is not with the moralizing nature of it. Yes, because lives, but you do it only in the case of the European Union. But you could take another step and do it in the case of your case studies.
Yeah,
The member
yes,
states,
yes.
and you do not do that. And why not? Because that would be, you label this whole issue. You could label how the different votes are differently treated with this Euro whiteness solidarity phenomena, which is great because then you can touch upon the nuances and everything. But that other point with your case studies, because you can do this only with the help of your case studies, where you will introduce how these different citizenship policies are being created. And if you could be as concrete with discussing those, then you could touch upon the actual implications that has going back to the supranational level. And you mentioned that you cannot touch upon the supranational level. You do not know how to apply to the supranational level this whole situation, because there is no one to take accountability, right? So there is no one to take as being responsible for this entire phenomenon. But if you would be as concrete with discussing the individual case studies and the steps being taken by the member states, then again it would inform back. You know what I mean?
Could I respond?
I don't know.
Yes, then let's please give the floor to the rest of participants. Yes.
Yeah, just a very quick response. It's impossible, and I agree with Elena on this. It would be very difficult to disentangle the two because precisely the delegation of powers to the EU creates the irresponsibility, and legally speaking, the hands of the member states on some occasions will be clean. So you cannot bring Frontex in front of any national court in the member states because of the design of the agency. At least we haven't. Well, we haven't tried because we don't have standing. We could have tried, but then it will be bending the rule of law a little bit. And then the Court of Justice, as designed, is not actually acting as an independent court. It has a clear agenda, and it has demonstrated that agenda on a number of occasions. So we know that we will not have standing against Frontex in front of that court either, which means that lawlessness is the essential element of the build-up of the system, precisely in order to excuse the member states in their utilization of the EU for these ends, and these ends create, as designed, the death toll which is required politically, probably at the national level, but which is officially depoliticized, supranational. And in this sense, Brexit is a great example for us because the Supreme Court in the UK could say something against this kind of policy, while the Court of Justice will never do it, and it hasn't done it. There are several cases where it condemned pushbacks, but of course the Court of Justice also knows that given the situation, all its pronouncements, all this case law will be ignored. So in the cases against Lithuania, Lithuanians didn't move a finger. They don't care about what the Court of Justice has to say, just like the Hungarians don't care. So here is another illustration of this liberalism. It doesn't matter because in this particular field, there is only one authority that the EU was granted by the member states, and that authority is the whitewashing of violence authority. There is no accountability, and there is no rule of law.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, we had some questions from the audience. 1, 2, 3 questions, if I count correctly. And so let's start with Judith first.
I'm sorry, I had to leave earlier to another zone. It's not my particular field of study, but I just wanted to highlight one element. Race is a social construct. There are many different interpretations of that. So I think even how race is conceptualized in UK is very different than in Hungary. No wonder when then they wanted to make a hostility campaign against migration, they showed terrorists, because we didn't have the same category of race. And before 2004, I think everyone remembers, those of us who are older, that we also had the difficulties to cross the border every 3 years before by a Hegyeshalom, which now we do regularly to move to CU. And when I was in Manchester, a victim of a crime, it's a small crime, they were stealing my belongings while I was giving a presentation a long time ago. Race Relation Act was applicable because they wanted to identify the race ethnicity of the victim, and I was not regarded as Caucasian. And so that's what I'm showing, that race is a social construct. When I worked for UN, we wanted to eradicate this term for various reasons after the Human Genome Project, but it's not any longer understood similarly. So we have to be very careful when we enter the race as a criteria of selection in various policies, because we are not understanding similarly. So there are also selling citizenships by the Hungarian government to Chinese and elsewhere. And also when the first migration wave came to Hungary, I think the first reaction for many people were to help. And then they had to launch a hostility campaign, a billboard campaign, equalizing the migrants with terrorists. There were pictures, they come here to rape, in order to, and criminalizing first those who want to help. Many doctors came to me that they helped the people in the therapy railway station, and then they were threatened that they did something illegal. And we know that they were marching towards Austria, this famous scene. Actually, they were well received by people. A lot of people were following these marching, and in Austria, they were well received. So I think that one thing that EU, for me, is a work in progress. I don't know any similar situation. So we have to remember the past of Iron Curtain. We were, I think we all lived in a time when we faced the difficulties. And then the EU had to develop the common values when we understand that, okay, these people, which were previously non-white Hungarians, in a non-white European, that they are part of Europe. But I think we have to be very careful, because it's a populist instrument how to not rationalize, but racialize debates. So it's a racialized debate, but I very much like Boldizsár's distinction. We have to make a distinction between EU law and how member states are implementing that. It was a battlefield between Hungary and EU, exactly, that Hungary didn't want to accept the Prime Minister the quota system. They wanted to allocate duties in relation to migration, which has not been accepted here. So I think it's a very important point, and I like the legal discussions in the paper, but I think we have to be very careful when we racialize our debate or selection criteria in this very complex phenomenon. And for me, EU is always a work in progress type of approach, and there is learning experiences from that. Of course, there is no excuse of losing so many lives, but I think we have to think about in the contributions and the debates within EU, how populists used and racialized the debate. And actually they had to act very fast. In Hungary, I was surprised, about 3 or 4 months they managed to change the attitudes towards these people. I think the first reaction was to help to these people. I'm sorry that I have to leave, but it's a very exciting discussion. I'm happy to hear.
Thank you. So I would like to give the floor to the other members of the audience, and please try to make your contributions brief because we are officially past our time. But first, Evelyn, please.
Yeah, I just have a general question about how much the public. So now with all of our talk was more institutional level, and there's kind of systematic racism in migration policies in EU, and I was wondering how much has to be account for the public mood, because there's definitely like rise of the immigration policies in all over Europe, and if how much do you think that this public anger towards these immigration policies has translated into EU policy that ends up being more has like a systematic racism? And so my question is general, because I also, as a migrant in different European countries, I see that in a general public that they're very frustrated with the migration policies. And then EU, and I really like the paper that it was really tackling this the image of West Europe as a higher moral ground, and you're the safeguarding the world, and but they're actually not in their actual practices. And so, but then there's also increasing like support for anti-immigration policies. And so, do you think that we need to correct this problem that you identified? Do you think we have to tackle it in the institutional level where we need more watchdog to correct this systematic racism in the policies, or do you think we need to address this public concerns first to actually get the support of the policy that's left rooted in the racial biases?
Thank you, and we have time for our last question from Dean.
Okay. Thank you, Dimitri and Elena, for sharing your work. I enjoyed it. So let's see. I have two kind of questions. The first one is, so I'm totally on board or agree with the idea that bigotry does underpin a lot of EU policy on immigration. This seems obvious. But my question is about one statement you made where you said there seems to be no differentiation between the UK and Hungary. Because in the case of the EU, or sorry, in the case of the UK, there does seem to be a very clear difference insofar as the UK Supreme Court did come down against the Rwanda plan. It was cancelled. Now the government has to then rehash the whole thing, try it again. It's going through this again. So it seems that in the UK case, institutions, and like what we would call liberal institutions, are working exactly how we expect they should work. And that doesn't exist in the Hungarian case. So there seems to be an analytical disconnect happening between the statement about there's no differentiation when in practice there does seem to be one. Another was, so this, when you were talking about the killing machine, the practice of Frontex and all this kind of stuff, it made me think of a book by De Leon. It's called The Land of Open Graves. This is about the US-Mexican border, though, of course. But it's very similar sort of practices which happened. There's a certain point in migration policing where US Border Patrol decided they would push migrants away from population centers like El Paso, where it was much easier, and through the deserts, like the Sonora Desert, where the death is much more likely. And this was a decided, purposeful, implemented project that was designed to dissuade migrants. And even like they would put up posters around, like, look how dangerous this is, you really don't want to do this, you're risking your life. Like, and it was an actively, consciously engaging project, weaponizing the desert, weaponizing the threat of death, that he documents very carefully through anthropological work, going through the desert, actually like finding bodies. And so he lets also the anthropology tell this story of the danger of death. So you make these kind of claims about killing machine, but I didn't see that kind of work being done to like show how Frontex is actually actively somehow either through accident or purposeful policy increasing the probability of death along the border in a designed institutional way. There seems like the article is trying to do two different things, not completely doing either one, as far as I can tell. It's a lot for an article to do, though, of course.
Okay, I see another raised hand.
It's a follow-up comment, 3 sentences.
Okay.
As a comparison, on the Polish-Belarusian border, Frontex was purposefully avoided, so they don't help there. And then we have more than 100 deaths confirmed already. So even lack of Frontex also will cause some sort of, death number. because no one is actually looking what is happening at the government level. So I guess this is another kind of element of the whole piece. But that's just a comment.
Okay, thank you. So if you'd like to respond,
Should we give the
please do.
floor to Elena first, and then
Yeah, I'll address the first and the last, the third question. That the fourth one was a comment, as far as I understand, simply because I didn't hear the second question. It was very difficult for me to hear, so I'll leave that one for Dimitri, hoping that it is more his part than mine. I'm not sure. Because I haven't heard that one. As for the argument that at the first time that there were, people were welcoming, and later on they realized that this is difficult, and it is questionable whether, or we should be more careful as whether to qualify this as a racism or no. Well, there is, in my view, there is no other way to qualify this when we do see a complete contrast as to how the refugees from Ukraine are treated, and how these other, asylum seekers they are treated, notwithstanding the numbers. Because yes, I know it is very easy to welcome 100 arrivals rather than thousands, and even 1.1 million, I think it was in Germany. So I'm aware that it is probably inconvenient, but in terms of qualifying this, that there is we do have many more actually refugees coming from Ukraine, and this is perfectly fine. This is the way it should be. That the way these people are treated for Ukraine is the way to go. Of course, what we argue basically is that there is a clear distinction and contrast of how they've been treated and what the EU. It's been only 8 days that the EU needed to activate the temporary directive, so protection directive. In only 8 days they activated this, and it's been more than 10 years now that we are actively discussing the deaths in the Mediterranean, and no one is doing nothing. Quite the contrary. It has been used actually, especially the influx and the Belarus border has been used to even strengthen the law. Of course, the EU is not doing this to protect the newcomers, but to protect its borders from these people. And this is what we find problematic, and it ticks basically all the boxes when compared to Ukrainians to be qualified as a racist step, I'm afraid. The third question actually was more as a comment regarding the distinction between the UK and Hungary with regard to judiciary. Yes, that's what we argued actually. They do differ very much, because the UK courts do their job properly, and rule of law is at a very high level, and compliance was at a very high level until recently, even still, until we see whether the Rwanda plan will go on. What is a little bit disappointing now is the action of governments trying to actually overturn this judgment of the Supreme Court and create a new practice and a precedent, which is very dangerous. So that is disappointing. Apart from that, yes, it is a huge difference, and this is what makes these two examples different, and this is what we emphasize actually in the paper. Thank you.
And just jump on this, we say that there is no difference when we speak about the ethnicization of citizenship. In this sense, the difference is really marginal. Only in the UK, it's easy to lose citizenship if you are not ethnically UK. And here in Hungary, it's easy to get citizenship, even though it's not framed as ethnicity in the majority of cases, of course. But we need to look beyond the fog of the law. And in this sense, of course, you might say what's so new. Citizenship is an illiberal totalitarian institution because it's given to you by blood. It goes against what our constitutions are based on, what our democracies are based on. And in this sense, there's an inbuilt paradox when we speak about any kind of constitutional system, because it is built into the global neo-feudal order of the world, whether we like it or not. And this paradox we need to take into account. And then in terms of Dean's comments as well on the thicker story, the paper really works with the footnotes. So the best thick story with interviews with the descriptions is by Ian Urbina in the New Yorker. He even managed to visit the EU-funded prisons where people are tortured en masse by now more than 100,000 by those guys who are funded by the EU to fish them out, because they actually paid double. First, they get paid by the EU with all these illegal accords by Ms. von der Leyen. It fell so low that one of the contestant governments of the Libyan non-regime, because there's no real state, struck down the agreement in one of its constitutional courts. But since there is no sovereign, even the claim of the EU that it has concluded an agreement with someone, rather than the basic crude reality that they equip the thugs who are on the blacklist of the US authorities for committing crimes, is another way of weaponizing the law against basic compliance with the values that the EU itself is preaching, and enabling the member states to break their own legal guarantees. And the question before the last, in law, governance by public opinion is laughed at, because either you govern or you listen to public opinion. Democratic scholars, democratic theorists might think differently, but I strongly disagree with the perspective that first we need people to believe that killing black people is wrong, and then we will stop killing those black people. This is not how it works in practice. So once crimes are committed, and we should be open about the fact that killing 35,000 people, even if they're not white, is a crime, someone has to be responsible. And for that, one of our colleagues here, Omer Schatz, is to be praised, because he notified the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court about the crimes of Ms. von der Leyen and her clique, using the immense power at her fingertips in order to kill dozens of thousands of people who try to come to the EU. Of course, there will be no case. Of course, there is absolutely no chance. But at least someone has moved the finger. We pretend that there is accountability, but we know very well, and the death toll proves that there is none. So this is a black hole, but it's only a black hole for someone who is not American, and for someone who doesn't look French, like that French lady who looked Turkish to the Greek bodyguards and was pushed back into the sea in the direction of Turkey.
So Bodhidharma wanted to make a contribution. Please do, and then we are massively over time, so I'm afraid we will have to end there.
3 short ideas. One, I think the paper would benefit if you explained why the EU treats Hungary differently than Lithuania. You say illiberal, but does that mean that the EU is on the liberal side, and that's why it appears as a punishing power? Second, with all due respect, I disagree with the perception that the Ukrainians are welcomed and the others are not. I mean, let's be honest and face the facts. The Syrians were welcomed in Europe, especially in Germany. They could come, they could stay. There was not much procedure conducted. So indeed, Europe did take in more than 1 million Syrians. And the third Dean is gone, about the role of the judiciary. In fact, the Hungarian judiciary was instrumental in trying to constrain what's happening. So that's why we had all the preliminary questions, in which then the European Court of Justice could find that Hungary's rules are incompatible with the EU. So the judiciary, a part of the judiciary, did the same like the UK Supreme Court. It is true that their field of maneuver has been tightened, and it is also true that some of the judges are not that pushing for the rights of the asylum seekers, but others actually were. So let's save the fame of the Hungarian judiciary to some extent. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. On that positive note, I'm afraid we have to end this discussion here. I would like to thank very much the presenters and the wonderful discussants we had for this engaging discussion. And I would like to take this opportunity to also remind the audience that this paper presentation was part of the AUTHLIB project, the Neo-Authoritarianisms in Europe and the Liberal Democratic Response, which is a Horizon Europe project. And I would like to ask you to follow our webpage, Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky accounts to keep being updated on project developments. Thank you very much and goodbye.